My wife cheated with a millionaire and my kids blamed me. Years later, they come back begging for money, but I already built an empire and a new family they never saw coming. I'm 50 years old. I work in tech. Well, now I own my own tech consulting company, and I need to tell this story because what happened basically destroyed my family. Or, I mean, the family I thought I had. I'd been married to Barbara for 25 years when I discovered she was cheating on me. And it wasn't just the cheating, it was everything that came after. How my own kids turned their backs on me. How my entire life fell apart in a matter of weeks. I guess I should start from the beginning. When everything seemed fine, when I was that guy who worked as an IT manager, lived in a nice house, had a wife I thought loved me, and 2 adult kids I was proud of. Barbara and I met when we were like 20 years old. We got married young. We had Jordan when I was 23, and Rachel 2 years later. We weren't rich, honestly, but we were doing well. Middle class, nothing spectacular but comfortable. She worked as an office manager at first, but when the kids came, we decided she'd stay home, and I dedicated myself to working harder to keep everything going. I don't know. I guess I thought we were happy, or at least content. You know what I mean? We didn't have those movie marriages where everything's perfect, but we didn't fight much either. We had our routine. We'd go out to dinner on Fridays, watch shows together, normal stuff for couples who've been together for years. The kids grew up fast, like they always do. Jordan graduated from college, got a job in sales, got married young too, like at 24. Rachel studied graphic design, met her boyfriend in college, and everything seemed to be going well. I felt, I don't know, satisfied, I guess, like I'd done things right. I'd been a good father, a good provider, a good husband. How wrong I was. I literally had no idea what was coming. Everything started to change like 8 years ago, when Barbara started acting weird. At first, it was small things, She spent more time getting ready, she was always on her phone, she went out, more often with friends. I'm not one of those paranoid guys, honestly, so I didn't pay much attention at first. I thought maybe she was going through some kind of midlife crisis or something, but the signs kept being there. She bought new clothes all the time, went to the gym more often, always had excuses to go out. And when I'd ask her something, she'd get defensive immediately. Like, why are you interrogating me? Don't you trust me? That kind of thing that makes you feel like the bad guy just for asking. One day, this was like 8.5 years ago, I decided to follow her. I know it sounds horrible, like those controlling guys in bad movies, but something in my gut was telling me something was wrong, and I was right. It was a Tuesday afternoon. She said she was going to meet some friends at a cafe, and I don't know why that specific day, decided I was going to see if it was true. I took the afternoon off from work, which I almost never did, and I followed her in my car, keeping my distance. She arrived at the cafe she'd mentioned, a Starbucks on the north side of town, and I parked where I could see the entrance, but she couldn't see me. I waited like 10 minutes, and then he arrived. Raymond. I didn't know him at that moment, obviously, but I found out everything later. He was a guy like 55 years old, maybe older, well-dressed, drove a black Mercedes class, one of those that cost like $100,000 or more. I saw him enter the cafe, and from where I was, I could see them through the window. The way they greeted each other, it wasn't how you greet a casual friend. It was a long hug, and then they sat at a table in the back and stayed there for like an hour, talking, laughing, and she touched him all the time. His hand, his arm, that way you touch someone when there's something more than friendship. I sat there in my car feeling like a complete idiot, with my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Part of me wanted to go in and make a scene, but another part, the bigger one, just wanted to see how far this went. When they left the cafe, they went together in his Mercedes, and I followed them because at this point, I was already committed to finding out the truth. They drove like 20 minutes to a hotel, one of those expensive hotels near downtown, and I saw them walk in together. They didn't even try to be discreet. They literally walked from the parking lot to the entrance like they were a normal couple. I stayed there in the parking lot for like 2 hours. I don't know what I was expecting exactly, to confirm what I already knew. When they finally came out, she looked different, relaxed, happy. in a way I hadn't seen her in years with me. That's what hurt the most, I think. Not just that she was cheating on me, but that she looked so genuinely happy with this guy. I drove home, grabbed some things, whatever I could get in a suitcase quickly, and went to a hotel. I couldn't be in that house. I couldn't even see her without wanting to scream or break something or both. She called me like 50 times that night, sent me like 100 messages asking where I was, what was wrong, if I was okay. I didn't answer any of them. The next day, I hired a divorce lawyer, the best one I could find, and started the divorce process. When I finally talked to her, like 3 days later, it was at a public restaurant because I didn't want to be alone with her. I told her I'd seen her, that I knew everything, and I expected her to at least have the decency to admit it and maybe apologize. But no, she basically told me, yeah, it's true. I've been seeing Raymond for like a year. He's successful. He makes me feel alive, things you could never do. Can you believe it? Not even a fake apology, no attempt to fix things, just cold confirmation that she'd been cheating on me for a whole year and that basically I was the problem. She told me Raymond owned a very successful landscaping business, that he had a lot of money, that he promised her a better life. And I just sat there thinking, what happened to the last 25 years? What happened to our vows? To our family? But she'd already decided, she'd already chosen, and I clearly wasn't her choice. The worst part, and when I say the worst, I mean what really destroyed me, was my kids' reaction. I told Jordan and Rachel about the divorce. Obviously. I thought they'd at least understand my position, that they'd see their mother was the one who destroyed our marriage. But no. They basically told me I was overreacting, that Mom had a right to be happy, that I'd probably pushed her into another man's arms by being distant or working too much, or who knows what. Jordan, my son, the guy I'd helped pay for his college education, literally told me, Dad, maybe you should see this as an opportunity for both of you to be happy. Rachel was worse. She called me like 2 months after the divorce to tell me she was getting married, and I got excited for a second, thinking maybe this meant she wanted me there, that despite everything, I was still her father. But no, she told me, you're not invited to my wedding. Mom's going to be there with Raymond, and we don't want drama. Plus, Raymond's going to walk me down the aisle because he's been more of a father to me in these last few months than you've been in my entire life. Those were her exact words. I remember it perfectly because I stood there in my new apartment. That small, sad apartment I'd moved to after the divorce, and I felt like I'd been hit in the stomach with a baseball bat. Jordan did the same thing with his wedding, which was like 6 months after Rachel's. He sent me a text message. He didn't even have the decency to call me, saying he'd decided I shouldn't be at his wedding because it would cause unnecessary tension and everyone would be more comfortable if I simply didn't go. The next few years were the darkest of my life. Honestly, I'd lost my wife, which at the end of the day I could understand. Marriages end, people change. But I'd lost my kids too, and that made no sense to me. I hadn't done anything wrong. I was the victim in all this, and somehow I'd ended up being the villain of the story, the absent father, the deficient husband who pushed his poor wife to seek comfort elsewhere. I threw myself into work because it was all I had. I worked like 70, 80 hours a week, took any project that came up, anything to keep my mind busy. My colleagues noticed something was wrong, obviously, but I didn't want to talk about it. I'd just say I was going through a difficult divorce and leave it at that. I didn't really have close friends. Most of our friendships had been couples we knew together, Barbara and I. And obviously, they'd all sided with her, because she was more charismatic, more social, more everything. It was like 2 years after the divorce that I met Samuel. He worked in the same industry as me, IT Consulting, and we met at a conference. We started talking about maybe starting something together, a tech consulting company, something small at first but with growth potential. I had nothing to lose at that point, honestly, so I said yes. We used our savings, got some small clients at first, and gradually the thing started to grow. It wasn't overnight, but like 3 years in we had a solid company, with good contracts, employees, real offices instead of working from home. It was at one of those tech conferences, like 4 years after the divorce, that I met Vanessa. She was 41 at the time. She was a widow. Her husband had died in a car accident like 2 years before. We started talking. I don't know. There was something about her that was different. She was warm, but also obviously carrying her own pain, and that created like an instant connection. We went out a few times, nothing serious at first, but gradually we fell in love, I guess, or at least I did. She understood what it was like to lose someone, to lose a life you thought you'd have, forever. We got married like 2 years after we met, a small ceremony. Just the two of us, and some close friends of Vanessa's. I didn't even invite my kids because, why would I? They hadn't been in contact with me for years. Occasionally, I'd get a text on Christmas or my birthday, but nothing real, nothing substantial. And then Ella came, our daughter, like 3 years ago. Seeing her being born was, I don't know, like a second chance at being a father, at doing it right this time, even though technically I hadn't done anything wrong the first time, but apparently that didn't matter. The company kept growing. Samuel and I were good partners. We had complementary skills. He was better with clients, and I was better with the technical part. And together, we'd built something really valuable. We had contracts with big companies, we billed well, we lived comfortably. I'd bought a new house, nothing excessive but nice, in a quiet neighborhood. And I finally felt like my life was in a good place, that I'd overcome all the shit from the past. And then, like 6 months ago, Jordan showed up at my door. I hadn't seen my son in 8 years, 8 full years without any real contact beyond generic messages. And suddenly, there he was, standing on my porch with Rachel next to him. My first reaction was shock, honestly, because they looked older, obviously. Jordan was 27 now, and Rachel 25, and seeing them there was like seeing ghosts from a past life. For a second I thought maybe they'd come to apologize, to reconnect, to say they'd been wrong all these years. But no. Jordan said, "Dad, we need to talk," and I let them in because, I don't know, I guess part of me still had hope this was some kind of reconciliation. We sat in the living room. Vanessa was in the kitchen with Ella, but could hear everything, and Jordan started talking. He said things had been difficult lately, that Raymond, the guy Mom had the affair with, had lost all his money, his business had gone bankrupt or something, and that basically Mom was in a difficult financial situation. And then Rachel said, "And we're also going through hard times. We both have problems with our mortgages, with bills, and we thought maybe you could help us." I sat there unable to believe what I was hearing. After 8 years, after 2 weddings I wasn't invited to, after being treated like I didn't exist, they were coming to ask me for money. They didn't come to apologize. They didn't come to reconnect. They came because they needed something from me. I asked Jordan, "Seriously? That's it? You show up after 8 years just because you need money?" And he had the audacity to say, "Well, Dad, you have money now. Your company's doing well. We're your family. Family's supposed to help each other." I told them to leave. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just told them they needed to leave my house. Rachel started crying, saying it was unfair, that they had kids now, my grandkids I'd never met, that how could I be so selfish? And I just repeated, "Please leave. I don't want to talk about this. I need you to go now." Eventually they left, and I sat there on the couch feeling like I'd just relived all the pain from 8 years ago in the space of 20 minutes. I thought that would be the end of it, but no. Like 2 weeks later, they showed up at my office. They literally barged in during a meeting with an important client, walked into the conference room where I was presenting, and Jordan started yelling that I was a terrible father, that I was abandoning my family, that his kids were going to be homeless because of me. I had to call security to get them out, while my client watched the whole scene, completely uncomfortable. I lost that contract, by the way. The client decided he didn't want to work with someone who had so much personal drama. After that, they sent me an email, both of them together, like 3 days later. It was long, like 2,000 words, and it started with an apology that sounded completely fake, like, "We're sorry about how things went the other day. It wasn't our intention to cause problems. We're just desperate." And then came the real reason for the email. They had a business idea. They wanted to open some kind of boutique cafe, and they needed me to invest $150,000 to help them get started. They said it was a safe investment, that they'd pay me back with interest, that they just needed this opportunity, and that as their father, I should want to help them succeed. It was at that moment I realized this was never going to end. If I gave them money this time, they'd come back for more the next time, and the next, and the next. It was never going to be enough, and I was never going to get what I really wanted, which was a real relationship with my kids. Because to them, I was just an ATM now, nothing more. So I blocked their numbers, blocked their emails, told my assistant that if they ever showed up at the office to call security immediately. I cut off all contact completely without leaving any door open. And then, like 2 months ago, Barbara showed up at my door. Not Jordan, not Rachel, but Barbara, my ex-wife, the woman who cheated on me and destroyed my life. She looked horrible, honestly. Much older than someone 48 should look, like the last few years had hit her hard. She said she needed to talk to me, that it was important, and I almost closed the door in her face, but something made me stay there and listen. She told me Raymond had left her. That when his business went bankrupt and he lost all his money, he basically told her he couldn't support her anymore and she needed to find her own way. That she was living in a small apartment, working retail to pay the bills, that the kids barely talked to her now because she couldn't help them financially. And then she said, "I'm sorry, Anthony. I'm sorry for everything I did. I made a terrible mistake. I ruined our family. I ruined our lives. And if I could turn back time, I would. I'd do everything differently." I stood there at the door listening to her cry, apologizing for things that happened almost 9 years ago, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction at seeing her like this, not even pity, really. I just felt like I was looking at a stranger, someone I used to know a long time ago but who no longer meant anything to me. I told her, "Barbara, it's too late for apologies, too late for regrets. You made your choices and I made mine, and now I have a life that doesn't include you or our kids. I wish you the best, but you need to leave." She kept trying to talk, saying we could start over, that we could fix things, that there was still love there somewhere. And I just shook my head and said, "There's nothing to fix. There's nothing left between us. Please respect that and don't come back here." I closed the door while she was still talking, and I stood there on the other side listening to her cry for a few minutes before she finally left. Vanessa came and hugged me. She didn't say anything, just hugged me, and Ella came running because she saw us standing there. I picked her up and thought, this is my family now. This is the life I've built, and I'm not going to let ghosts from the past ruin it. I don't know if Jordan and Rachel will ever understand what they did. Probably not. They'll probably keep thinking I'm the bad guy, the father who abandoned them when they really needed help. And maybe Barbara really does regret it. Maybe she really realized what she lost, but that's not my problem anymore. I've been thinking a lot about all this lately, especially at night when Ella's asleep and the house is quiet. I wonder if I did the right thing, if I should have forgiven, if I should have given a second chance. But every time I ask myself those questions, I remember that day I wasn't invited to my daughter's wedding. I remember Raymond walking her down the aisle in my place. I remember my kids showing up after 8 years just because they needed money. And I know I made the right decision. You can't rebuild a relationship based on financial need. You can't forgive someone who only apologizes when they're desperate. You can't be a father to people who only see you as a resource to exploit. Last week, Ella asked me if I had other kids besides her. I told her the truth, that yes, I had a son and a daughter from a previous marriage, but that they'd chosen not to be part of our lives. She asked me why, and I told her that sometimes people make decisions that hurt others, and that it's okay to walk away from those people, even if they're family. I don't know if she completely understood. She's only 3 years old, but I think it's important for her to know from now that family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to be there for you, who support you, who love you unconditionally. Samuel told me recently we should expand the company, open another office in another city, take bigger risks, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep building, keep growing, because that's the only thing I know how to do now. Keep moving forward. I'm not going to look back. I'm not going to waste more energy wondering what could have been different. Because at the end of the day, I didn't destroy my family. They did. And I'm just living with the consequences of their decisions while building something new. something better, something that's really worth protecting.